I'd like to explain a new feature or an old feature that has been revived somehow in JCB. The feature is now visible on many of the pages. It's called Run Expansion. Now, I realize that when you would click on this at the moment, it'll give you an error and it will tell you the expansion failed. Please check your settings in the global options of JCB under the development tab. So you need to basically open these global options, and under the development tab you need to read some of these instructions. So development method tab has now this new switch called expansion, and here is basically the documentation on what expansion is all about. Really what has happened in my developing experience is that we build multiple components that have a relationship with each other, share classes, share code and files, and while you're busy working on those components, you need to oftentimes basically compile and install them to test whether things have broken or if everything's still stable and so forth. So that's what I use the expansion method primarily for. But there is a future application of the expansion method which has not yet been fully realized, and when we are able to bring all of that to the community, then I will make another tutorial in explaining the expansion of expansion. It might be too much, but for now the expansion method is primarily an option of selecting multiple components. You can see here you can select multiple components and then have them compiled and installed at once, and quite rapidly actually. So you could say, okay, I want all of these components to be moved to the backup folder and to a repository folder, and show the custom placeholders, and give me a message, not just that it was successful but everything which was done. You could have this run on a cron job, which means it keeps on running in the background, always compiling and installing this over and over and over, and that is part of, if our future purpose or plans come to pass, then you would see why this was actually necessary. So at this point this maybe doesn't make that much of sense, but for the previous explanation, which is what you see here, is to basically just install and compile multiple different components. I've selected the same different components. So we would do this. Oh, it's going to ask that. Okay, there we go. Save and close. So now we have our expansion components selected. If I now click Run Expansion, it says access denied, and that is because the expansion works through the API. There is a slowly we are busy developing an API for JCB. It's not fully there yet, but we're busy with it, and in the API we need to actually have a user selected that has enough permission to actually compile and install components. So you need to select a user that has that level of permission as the API user used during the execution of the expansion method. Okay, so let's try again. If we now do that, if you think about how long it would have taken to install compile and install, compile and install, compile and install each of those components individually, and the time that it now took to compile it and install it, there is a somewhat of a difference, and the fact that it doesn't give you the option to download the package. It immediately after compiling it actually installs it and removes it from the temporary folder. So you can see it tells you that all of, that it's been done for this component, for that one, and so forth, all the way down here. So all these components now were compiled and installed right into the system in that moment. And that's really, at the moment, what the expansion method is primarily used for. Like I said, we have some future plans with this feature when it comes to integrated developing concepts where we as teams work together. Then there is the possibility that we could use this feature even further. Okay, so that is the expansion method. I hope this makes sense. I mean, if you don't like it or you don't see the need for it, you could just ignore it. Even if you did set it to use the expansion method, it only means that your expansion buttons will function when you click them. By default, JCB ships with the expansion method inactive, and so that if someone clicks here by accident, it will tell you that the expansion method is disabled and that you should actually enable it for it to work. And I mean, that also makes sense, right? Because you don't want the expansion method to trigger without you knowing why and what it's doing. Okay, well, thanks for watching. Until next time.